They say pain changes you. I never believed that until my world crumbled in ways I never imagined possible. This isn't just my story. This is a journey through grief, faith, and finding purpose, when everything you thought was true feels like a lie. If you've ever questioned why good people suffer, or why God seems silent when you scream his name, then maybe this story is for you. Life used to be simpler. I was a wife, a mother, and a teacher in a quiet town where time moved a little slower, and people still waved from their porches. My husband, David, was a carpenter. Strong hands, soft voice, and a heart that pulsed with kindness and faith. He built furniture that carried stories, like the kitchen table where we shared birthdays and prayed before meals. Our children, Emily and Ben, filled the house with noise and crayons and questions about stars and dinosaurs. Sundays meant church, not out of routine, but because David believed. And when someone believes with their whole being, it changes the energy of everything around them. I believe too, because David's belief anchored me. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was ours. David grilled burgers during summer cookouts and sang hymns while working in the garage. Our daughter Emily adored him, her hero. Ben, our youngest, followed him like a shadow, always asking questions, always watching. I remember thinking that God had smiled on us, that our little world was somehow protected from the big, awful things that happen to other people. That's the danger of comfort. You start mistaking it for safety. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't prepared. Not for the phone call, not for the diagnosis, not for the unraveling that came afterward. And maybe no one ever is. When David started feeling tired, I told him to rest. When the pain in his stomach wouldn't go away, I thought it was stress. Teaching at Willow Creek High was demanding and his carpentry business was growing. He brushed it off, always too humble to worry anyone. But something in his eyes started to fade. He got quiet, slower. The man who used to toss our kids in the air like pillows began struggling just to climb the stairs. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to believe it. Denial is a gentle liar, whispering that things will be fine even as they fall apart. The day we heard pancreatic cancer was the day the oxygen left the room. The doctor's voice was kind, but the words were brutal. David held my hand and said, "God's got this." I remember nodding, but I didn't feel anything except fear. He started chemo. The hair fell. The weight dropped. But his Bible stayed beside his bed, open, worn, full of scribbled prayers. He never stopped believing. I did. Not all at once, but like a faucet slowly tightening shut. I didn't tell anyone, not even him. But the questions began. The anger started to simmer. Watching the strongest person you know wither is a kind of emotional torture no one can prepare you for. Our kids saw it. Emily stopped talking. Ben started drawing pictures of heaven. I tried to be strong, but grief is heavy, and I was carrying it while trying to hold up 2 more lives. I started teaching on autopilot. My body went to work. My mouth read lesson plans, but my soul was somewhere else screaming, "God, why him? Why us? Why take the best man I've ever known and leave us shattered?" No answer came, just silence. And silence when you're drowning feels cruel. David passed away on a cold morning. The house was quiet, except for the sound of my children crying beside me. I held him until the warmth left his skin. That moment replayed in my mind for months. Still does. I felt something break inside me. Something permanent. I buried my husband, and with him, I buried my trust in a God who seemed to be watching and doing nothing. If you've ever stood at the edge of loss and felt like your prayers bounced off the ceiling, you'll understand what I mean. And if you haven't yet, maybe one day you will. That's why I'm telling this story. If you're still with me, it means you're searching. Maybe for answers. Maybe for understanding. Maybe just for someone who's been where you are. Keep listening. I don't promise easy resolutions, but I promise honesty. I promise that what I found in the darkness was something I never expected. And if you've ever felt alone in your grief, if you've questioned why faith sometimes feels like betrayal, then keep watching. Because my story is just beginning, and maybe so is yours. Grief doesn't show up all at once. It trickles in. First, it's silence, an unbearable stillness in the rooms where laughter used to live. Then it's noise, sudden bursts of anger, tears that come without warning. I woke up each morning expecting to hear David's hammer in the garage, to smell his coffee brewing. But he wasn't there. His toothbrush was still in the cup, his boot still by the door, and it was like the world had moved on while I was frozen in a snapshot of before. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness. It was pretending I was okay for the kids. I would pack lunches, drive to school, teach literature. But inside, I was unraveling. Ben would ask me every night, "Is Daddy watching us from heaven?" And I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to give him comfort. But what if I wasn't sure anymore? What if heaven felt as far away as God himself? Emily, on the other hand, was just angry. She slammed doors, ignored her grades, stayed glued to her phone. When I tried to talk to her, she'd shut down. One night, after another failed attempt to connect, she said something I'll never forget. "You're not even here anymore. You died with him." And in a way, she was right. I hadn't just lost David. I'd lost my identity, my certainty, my anchor. I started skipping church. The place that once gave me comfort now made me feel like a stranger. I couldn't sing the hymns. I couldn't listen to Pastor Mike talk about God's goodness without feeling like a hypocrite. People would say, "We're praying for you," and I'd smile and nod. But inside I was screaming. Where was God when David was suffering? Where was he when I begged on my knees night after night? Prayer didn't heal David. Faith didn't save our family from breaking. And I was tired of pretending that I still believed in something that felt so far away. The worst days weren't the ones filled with tears. They were the numb ones. Days when I felt absolutely nothing. I'd stare at the wall for hours. I'd drive home from school and not remember the route. Food lost its taste. Music made me angry. And the Bible on my nightstand? I couldn't even look at it. Every verse felt like salt on a wound. Romans 8:28, the one everyone quoted, "All things work together for good," felt like a cruel joke. I wanted to rip the page out, because nothing about this felt good. Nothing about watching the love of your life die felt like part of a divine plan. And yet the world didn't stop. Bills still came. Dishes still needed to be done. The kids still needed to be fed. I wore my grief like armor, hard on the outside, hollow within. Sometimes I'd sit in the car just to cry so they wouldn't hear me. Sometimes I'd scream into a pillow until my throat burned. I didn't want to burden anyone. I didn't want to admit I couldn't do this. But every night I went to bed wondering how long I could keep this up. How long I could keep pretending that I had anything left to give. And maybe you've been there, holding everything together while falling apart inside. One night, something inside me cracked. I had just come back from the cemetery, my hands still cold from tracing David's name on the stone. Emily was blasting music. Ben was drawing another picture of David with a halo. I sat at the table, staring at the photo of the four of us at a barbecue, smiling. It felt like a lie. I picked up my keys and left. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. My mind was foggy, my heart pounding. And then, the headlights, the sound of metal, the silence. And then, light. Not the hospital light. Something else. Something not of this world. And that's where everything changed. At first I thought I was dreaming, but it felt too real. I was standing in a field, golden, glowing, impossibly peaceful. I wasn't in pain. I wasn't broken. The grief wasn't crushing me anymore. I breathed, really breathed, for the first time in months. Then I saw him. Not a painting, not a sermon, but him, Jesus. And he wasn't angry. He wasn't distant. He looked at me the way David used to, like I mattered, like he saw all of me. I fell to my knees and asked the question that had haunted me for months. Why? And what he told me would begin to rebuild my shattered faith. He didn't answer right away, not with words. First, he just listened. I poured out my heart, every bit of anger, every unanswered prayer, every sleepless night spent staring at the ceiling asking why David had to die. I told him I was tired of pretending, tired of carrying faith like a burden instead of a gift. He nodded, not offended, not surprised. The world wasn't meant to be like this, he said. I created it whole, but sin fractured it, and now creation groans in pain. And then I saw it, a vision, like a tapestry torn down the middle, cracks of disease, shadows of death. This wasn't what he wanted. This was what humanity had chosen. It wasn't God who brought cancer into the world. It was the brokenness we live in. And that shattered everything I thought I knew. I had blamed him for everything, but in that moment, I realized he had been grieving with me. Every prayer I thought he ignored, he had caught in his hands. Every scream I thought vanished into silence, he had heard. "I didn't take David from you to punish you," he said. "But I never left your side, not for a second." I saw scenes of my past, me at David's bedside, me crying alone in the kitchen, me yelling into the void. And in every scene, he was there, quiet, holding space for my pain. I asked him about free will, about why he lets us make choices that lead to suffering. "Because love demands freedom," he said. "If I forced obedience, it wouldn't be love. It would be control. And I don't want slaves. I want sons and daughters." That hit me in the chest. I had always thought of faith as rules and discipline, but here in the presence of God it felt like relationship, like a parent aching for their child. I remembered David reading Psalm 23, even while dying. "Though I walk through the valley," that wasn't a denial of pain. It was proof that God walks through it with us. I told Jesus that David didn't deserve to suffer, that he was kind, generous, faithful. "I know," he said with a tear in his eye. And David's suffering wasn't wasted. It softened hearts. It strengthened faith. It showed my love to others. And I realized I had been looking for fairness in a world that was never promised to be fair. What God promises isn't the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose within it. And I thought of the hospice nurse who started reading scripture again because of David, of Ben asking questions about heaven, of the casserole dropped off by a neighbor who hadn't been to church in 10 years. I asked him if David was okay, if he was happy. Jesus smiled and motioned to a place behind me, and there he was, whole, radiant, no pain, no tubes, just David, like I remembered him on our wedding day, laughing and building something with his hands. I ran to him, and for a moment, it felt like heaven had opened wide enough for me to breathe again. "I'll be with you again," he said, "but not yet. There's more for you to do." And that was the hardest part, letting go, turning back. But Jesus touched my shoulder. "You're not going alone. I'll walk with you." When I woke up in the hospital, everything hurt, physically, emotionally, but something was different. The bitterness was gone, not the grief. I still missed David with every breath, but the questions that once haunted me had been met with love, not logic, with presence, not platitudes. Lisa was by my side. Pastor Mike was praying. Emily and Ben were safe. And I realized I had been given something rare, clarity, a glimpse of the eternal, a chance to live the rest of my life with eyes wide open. And I wasn't going to waste it. I had a message now, a story, a testimony. So I started talking, first to Lisa, then to the congregation, then to anyone who would listen. Not just about David, but about what happens when faith is tested in the fire, about a God who doesn't always explain, but who always stays, about a Savior who meets you in the wreckage and says, "Walk with me." I opened a grief support group in our community center. Just a folding table, some chairs, and a coffee pot, but the room filled with hurting people. People like me, people searching, and I didn't have all the answers. But I had hope, and sometimes, that's enough to light someone else's darkness. Maybe you're watching this because your heart is broken too. Maybe you've stood in a hospital room or by a grave or in the middle of your own quiet chaos, asking the same questions I did. Where is God? Why is this happening? Does he see me? I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you this. I've met the one who does. And even when the pain didn't leave, he never did either. He was there, in the silence, in the questions, in the tears I thought no one saw. He was there, and he's with you too. Don't wait until you're lying broken in a hospital bed to ask the questions that matter. Start now. Start where you are. Whether you believe in Jesus, doubt him, or have walked away like I did, he's still near, still waiting, still willing to walk with you through every valley. This isn't about religion. It's about relationship, about trust, about knowing you are not abandoned in your pain. If you felt like no one understands, he does. If you've been angry at God, he can take it. And if you've lost faith, like I did, he can restore it. If something in this story stirred your heart, even a little, I invite you to take one step closer. Not because everything will suddenly become easy, but because nothing in this life was meant to be carried alone. Jesus doesn't promise comfort. He promises presence. He promises to redeem the broken parts of your story for something eternal. And I believe He's doing that right now, even in this moment, even through this screen. That's not a coincidence. That's grace. So here's what I'm asking. If you're hurting, don't stay silent. Talk to someone. Reach out. Pray. Even if it's messy. And if this message spoke to you, if you want more truth, more hope, more stories like this that remind you you're not alone, subscribe to this channel, not just for content, but for connection, for community, and most importantly, follow Jesus. Not because it's easy, but because He is faithful, even when life is not. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's grieving, someone who's asking why. It might be the lifeline they've been waiting for. And if you're ready to take a step of faith, even if it's small, tell someone, leave a comment, send a message. Let someone walk with you the way I had people walk with me. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in honest moments, in shared stories, in brave steps forward. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share the hardest and most beautiful parts of my life with you. I don't take that for granted. I see you. I care about you. And I want you to know, you are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are not disqualified by your doubt. You are deeply, relentlessly loved. That's the truth. That's the promise. That's the hope I hold on to every day. So until next time, hold tight to grace. Don't let go of hope. And wherever you are on your journey, know this. I'm walking with you in spirit, and Jesus is walking with you in truth. I'll see you in the next video. Keep going. You're not alone.